Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 527th episode of Constructed Criticism. I'm your host, Mason, joined by my co-host, Abe Stein. Abe, how you doing?
I'm good. I mean, as far as what are we, 3, 4 days out from the RC? I'm about as cool as a cucumber can be when you throw it near an oven. So it's going all
Yeah,
right.
I'm feeling pretty good. I'm leaving in like 30 hours for the RC. So, I'm ready. I got my
30 hours?
30 hours, I think. Super
Beautiful.
exciting. It's going to be fun. Definitely come up and say, hey, if you see Abe or myself. Spencer will not be there, and as he is today, as he is sick. But we need to get into our main topic, Abe, because we're going to talk about playing under pressure today. But before we do that, really quickly, a shout out to our sponsor, Untapped GG. You can use their program for all of your Magic Arena needs from draft to constructed. Check out the link in the description if you've not tried it already. There is a free version and a premium version. And, you can try out the free and see if you like it and move from there. But let's move on to our main topic, playing under pressure. And this is kind of a very sort of nebulous one. And the idea sort of comes from my understanding of like wanting to talk about this because a lot of people experience it, and it's something that comes up a lot in either coaching or in the Discord and stuff like that. So, Abe, what does this sort of mean to you? And let's just hop into it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of this episode, and I know this was one that Spencer was passionate about, so I'm sad that he had to miss it. But the whole idea is really just Magic is something that is a performance sport, so to speak, in the sense that, like, it as much as you're not out on the field running around and being like a physical athlete, there's a lot of mental strain, especially that goes into like playing a game of Magic, and in terms of balancing everything you're thinking about and understanding the game you're playing, and pressure and stress psychologically are things that build on you and make it hard to really focus in the spots where you need to most, and kind of the real thing, especially having, we talked about Pioneer last week. There's a lot that I'm sure there's a lot of content out there that's going to try to prepare you right at the last minute, cram you for the test tomorrow with the RC if you're an American listener who's qualified today. But you know looking at the situation of the RC, it's, for some people, it's the one maybe first time ever playing. Might be the biggest stage they've ever played on. Maybe it's, they really feel like it's their time. They'll find themselves. Honestly, I mean, the RC is a tournament where you find yourself in a lot of really high leverage matches. You're playing a lot of matches that really matter. And just taking the opportunity to talk about what that feels like to us from our experience as players who have experienced that a lot more, how we handle that stress, how we kind of think about it, and how we approach those high leverage and pressure filled situations, where those pressures come from, just really getting into that, so that hopefully y'all can have that in the back of your mind, have a little mantra for yourself of, it's going to be all right. I can handle this. Win it in for day two, or back against the wall. I'm 0-2 or 0-3 at the RC, or 3-3 at the RC. And I've still got a long way to go. How do you handle that pressure and still say playing your best on top of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great breakdown of what we're talking about. I think we should just like talk about it from here. And I think one thing often makes me not very helpful in these conversations is that I personally have framed it all in a way, and just me as a person, I really like it. I like the pressure. Like, I like when, it's like do or die. I have to clutch up, like team tournaments I don't super like for various reasons. I just like don't like the idea of like letting down a teammate, and that's where I can relate a bit more with like a friend or something like that. Like they're counting on me. But for the most part, Magic is such a self improvement journey and something that's all about myself typically, and I only think about me and my comparison to where I was in the past. That these are exciting moments. Like, Abe mentioned maybe at the RC in your O3. Well, we had Sky come on the podcast, right, Abe? And they talked about how they started O3 and rattled their way to the Pro Tour. And then because Sky tested with Team CFB, Rakdos Vampires was found, right? Like they were going to play Mono Black. They didn't think to put Fable Blood
Mm-hmm.
Tithe in the deck. And had Sky given up early on and resigned themselves to defeat, one, a bunch of you might have had more fun during Pioneer season. So if you want to hate on Sky, feel free to listen to that episode, find their Twitter. And then two, like just everything would be so different, but they didn't give up. They knew that like it's unlikely they're not a favorite in order to make the Pro Tour, but they could, and they're still live. So why would they quit playing? Why would they quit trying their best? Like they played against a bunch of strong players in a row, didn't stop them. They just kept going. And I kind of like really think about that a lot in these situations. And I think about like when the pressure's on me and I'm playing for top eight or playing for the Pro Tour and just how awesome it feels. And I feel like feeling things is great. So whether that's disappointment or, excitement, to me, it is both really fun. And, I was talking to a friend this past weekend. We're going to the weekend, excuse me. And I was talking about how I've been working so much and like, I'm definitely going to play the RCQ next to my house and maybe I'll play one on Sunday, blah, blah. And they were like, well, like, don't stress yourself out or whatever. Like, make sure you have time to recharge. And to me, playing in those tournaments, even though I'm already qualified for the RC, I still just like the sweats. Like, oh, am I going to make it? Like, oh, can I like figure out this breach deck I'd never played before? Right. Like, to me, that is relaxing and I feel better after doing it. So to me, I just look at all of this like, this is what I want to do. I want to do these things so it's exciting and fun. And I don't feel that anxiety and like pressure unless someone's relying on me. That being said, I actually love it when one teammate's lost Abe and one teammate's won, and it's all on me. That I actually really like because I love the idea of getting to like be the hero. Or if I lose, it's once again it's all back on me. It's all everything I could do. It's all in my own results. And yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of a psycho. Is what
You are. I'm sitting here, like, if there's not gonna be video for this episode, but if there was, it would have just been, like, the entire time you're talking, just me, like, slowly nodding my head no. Like, I just can't relate. Like,
yeah.
I vividly remember having this problem when I, like, was starting to put up results and, like, starting to play tournaments. Seriously, playing these, like, 6 or 7 round standard super IQs, these 1Ks, like an hour away from my house when I was in like over the summer when I was in high school, and like shaking, playing a win and in for top eight and being like, oh my God, because I don't know, like I think that not every, and even myself to a degree, I've gotten much better about this as I've gotten older and had more experience, but like I love the self-improvement journey of Magic. It is very, very hard for me to separate that journey of self-improvement from the individual storyline that I feel when I'm like, in a Magic tournament. Like the feeling of like, okay, sure, my fate is in my hands. I need to perform my best. I'm playing for the trophy, I'm playing for the invite, I'm playing for whatever. It's understanding how to be in those moments is, I think, different for every person. And for me, it was something I had to really learn how to do. Like I don't naturally really know how to be in those moments. They make me pretty uncomfortable if I start thinking too much. I mean, honestly, if I start thinking too much about like being 5-0 at a tournament, sometimes I like lose my mental and I'm like, I'm sitting down for a match and like kind of out of it, or like the whole time the vibes just feel off. Like you've seen this before, I think, Mason, where have you seen me between rounds of a tournament just suddenly be like, no, the vibes are wrong, and then to start like running around doing random things until things are right, like I'm in everything ever all at once. Like it's seriously like I'm literally just trying to find weird things to do to get my brain to like reset itself, so I don't feel the pressure of like the situation I'm in. Because while like, yes, today I'm trying to be the player that's better than the player I was yesterday, and yes, my result does not dictate that. At the same time, as a human being with wants in the world, like I want to succeed, and it's hard to not let that build some amount of residual stress into my psyche. And so maybe I'm just the one who should do a lot of talking this episode for listeners out there who aren't beasts who just rock in and are like, oh, I'm playing a win in for top eight, time to clutch up because I'm built different. Like,
Yeah, no,
like not everyone's
mean, like
that.
To me, it's like a lot of it's like experiences almost, right? Like I'm playing to see like how I've always talked about this a bunch on the show, like, how good can I be, blah, blah, blah. Like that's kind of like my overarching. But like when I really think about it, what I care more about is I'd rather make the win and end situation for top eight and lose every time and then not have like a bunch of middling tournaments that don't stand out. You know what I mean? Like I personally rather feel something than not. And maybe there's some amount of like survivor's bias or, like I have done top eights and won things. So I feel differently now, right? But I do feel, and for a long time, I felt like just like the act of improving and pushing myself and wanting to be in those situations where like I want to play against like, Seth Manfield for the Pro Tour invite at the RC. I don't want to be in a spot where I draw, right? Like that's like I'll take it. Like because playing the Pro Tour is going to give me that. I'm going to get more of those
Yeah.
games, but it's like not what I really want. At like Pro Tour Albi one, I started off 1-2 in limited, and then played against Javier Dominguez at 1-2, and lost to Javier, and then played against Paulo Vitor Damarosa at 1-3. Like that's so sick. Like that to me is better. I feel better about that tournament than a bunch of them I won. Like it feels better than the DreamHack. It feels better than the SCG. Like getting those high pressure moments where it's like I get to play against like I talk about it a lot on the podcast. I think Javier is extremely underrated, and I think if he was born in the United States of America, we would talk about him like we do John Finkel, unironically. And I just think that's just unfortunate sort of bias of how the game is. But I think he's insane. I got to play him at like almost cusp there the Pro Tour. That's so. And then I got to play against PV, who I know is one of the best players in the world of all time. There's no like like I'm kind of like on an island myself here. Like I know PV is one of the best players, and I got to play against him, and that is so sick and so awesome. And like that is so I lost like a good matchup against PV, but it's also so sick that he like clutched it out and like won. Like that's awesome. Like to me that is like such a good and awesome feeling. I remember like losing for the top eight. I would have had a win and then draw at an SCG. Maybe I'd have to have played depending on how breakers go, but at the time it looked to be a win and a draw. And I played against Affinity, and I was playing Amulet, and I like thought through everything, all the lines, and I had to secure a Triumph Scout, and I had to either put into play this Ghost Quarter or this Radiant Fountain. And I dexterity errored the wrong one. I came to the conclusion, I don't remember which one it was now, let's say it's Radiant Fountain. I came to the conclusion Radiant Fountain was right instead of the other one. And I just dexterity errored, and I was like, it's back then, you don't get to take it back. I'm like, yeah, this is how it is, pass, and my opponent, the only way I can get punished, they draw a Galvanic Blast, and they did, and they Galv Blast me, and I lost that round and lost the next one. That's awesome. Like the feeling of getting to play for top eight, I remember that so like it's so clear in my mind. It's so
So that doesn't affect how you feel like you play at all. You feel like
yeah.
you're able to just think clear headed and just be 6'2" and beautiful in every situation.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter. They're all
That's
agnostics of each other.
so I'm so jealous.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous that your brain is wired. But my brain is literally the exact this is so funny to me. Because like for me, I'm almost the exact opposite. Like I have had to spend the better part of like I honestly at some points I felt like I was a monk. I was like, I need to just sit here and depersonalize myself, my wants, my like the things that I'm thinking about and feeling about the externalities of the game of Magic I'm about to play and completely separate them from my emotional space and my physical space to be like, okay, I am only thinking about the game pieces and the cards in front of me. And like maybe if I start to feel really comfortable, I'll start to work in like, am I looking for a tell off of my opponent? Am I like, like starting to really engage with the player across the table for me beyond just playing the board and figuring out. And at the times honestly where I've had the most success, it has had like I have felt so comfortable that I'm doing that a lot. I've told the story of I don't think I've told on the show, but I tell the story a lot of winning my second Pro Tour invite to go to Kyoto, where I made a play which if my opponent had not been like I could see based on the way they've been playing, they're playing a like Teamer Dynavolt Tower with Torrential Gear Hulk, and I knew that they only had like the way the game had gone, I was like pretty sure they only had one counterspell left, and I only had one red source, and I needed to resolve release the gremlins, but I needed them to counter something first because I only had one red source, so I couldn't two spell them in a turn. So I end of turn cast a Harness Lightning that if they were paying attention to the fact that I have to pay an energy for the red mana, which I did tick down on the die, and like everything was represented fine. The judge was watching the whole match, but I just like made this play to try to kill a Torrential Gearhook they had in play. I'd only have been able to deal 5 damage, but because they were like, "Oh, Harness Lightning kills my thing," like they're so locked in on the game being played, and they had so much trust I wouldn't just like cast a spell that did nothing, and they were so caught up in it they didn't stop and just think. They cast their Void Shatter on my Harness Lightning, I untap, release the Gremlins, and then force game 3 and 1. So like those things, I think like when you're really existing though, but like before that, I had to listen to like 7 minutes straight of like straight hype music to get myself to calm the fact that I'm literally about to play a match of Magic where I'm going to the Pro Tour in Japan, and I know that that's the prize, or I'm going home effectively empty-handed. And like, that's so much pressure to face. Like, I don't know how I could feel anything other than nervous and let that affect me without like doing all these rituals that allow me to like recenter myself into what really matters in that scenario. And so it's actually night and day to me.
Yeah, I think some of it might just be the way we think about it, honestly. Which I mean, like that's most things, right? But like one thing I do want to make clear is like it's not like I was just like happy go lucky after I lost like that round with the Tribe Elder, right? Like I definitely like I felt it, but I also pushed it aside until the tournament was over because I can only play the tournament at hand, right? Like part of this is feeling it. Like I feel the sting or whatever, but I have to push that aside because I have to play the tournament. And I know I've gotten that memory. And I also know I was like, it was in my grasp. You know what I mean? And under current rules, I would have just, I've been like, because I even said like Radiant Fountain or whatever, and then I put in the thing, the Ghost Quarter, and then I'm like, got or whatever. And under the current rules, they'd let me swap. And then I'd be in the top 8, or would have had a win it in for the top 8, right? Which would have been cool.
Yeah.
Whatever, I'd had another one, that's fine. But like, I remember it in part because like it mattered so much, but it's also to me, it's like, oh, I was like in striking distance, and all I can do is put myself in positions to top 8. Like, so we're going to the RC in a couple of days, right? As of right now, Abe, there are 1,801 people qualified. 64 of us get a Pro Tour invite. The most likely outcome is that you and me do not get a Pro Tour invite. That is
absolutely
just it by like a country mile. We are, I think, a fair statement. Maybe it sounds a little cocky. We have more percentage than the average person does, and even that is so small. We are not likely to make it to the Pro Tour. So when I reach the spot where I'm playing for the Pro Tour invite, where I'm playing for the top 8, or heaven forbid, Worlds. Maybe if I was playing for Worlds, because that's such an unattainable thing to me, just from like when we started playing Magic, the only way to really make Worlds was to win a PT. So it's just kind of like, if you do this like unbelievable thing, you did this more unbelievable thing, It's just like,
yeah, you get to listen to Patrick Chapin tell you about Siege Rhino and like
yeah, exactly. It's just like it's like such an unrealistic thing that like maybe in that situation I'll feel that way. But in the situation where I'm like playing and like, like live to make the Pro Tour, it's just exciting and it just feels good. And I get to walk away with that experience. And I know that like, I put myself in the position to achieve my goal, and that's all I can do. And I played my cards right. And maybe I played my cards wrong, and maybe that's like a learning moment for me, right? Maybe,
and you never find that being in that position makes you right, and being like that is on. It is so astounding to me the amount of emotional balance that you must have to be able to do that. Because like for me, being in that spot, knowing that I am like close to victory, that is where like that is where I will blunder and like throw it all away. That's where I'll like,
it's exciting.
Like forget to double check my math because I'm so excited, because it is like, right, like because my adrenaline is pumping and my brain is connecting the dots that like what I'm doing is going to like very likely convert me to the result that I want. I mean, I remember like when I qualified for Chicago, well, I guess at the time I qualified for
Barcelona, whatever it was.
Yeah, for Barcelona. Yeah, at the time I qualified for Barcelona, like I I had like a tiebreaker sweat, or whatever, but I literally was like, I can't let myself really feel good about this, and I'm not gonna like really celebrate or pop off until I know it's final. Because I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
sure, I did that, and I played that match, and I won, and it was like, I I thought about all my decisions and like managed to get myself to play good Magic through that match. And I
Mm-hmm.
was very nervous.
Mm-hmm.
You want to win, you want to succeed, and
Oh, I was
it was
watching
a
you.
mono green mirror match. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a mono green mirror match. It
Yeah.
can kind of go either way, and I was fortunate that things broke my way and everything, but it's like that kind of pressure of knowing that what is at stake, and that you were watching, that Skylar was watching, like people who are really supporting me and caring about my success watching me. So it's like it's not just me who's at my feelings are not just the only ones at stake. Not that you're going to be like feel a different way, but like I know that you guys are rooting for me,
I'm
and
supportive
like
of you. I want to be there when you win to like pop off with you or whatever. And obviously in that situation, like I didn't know you were in a tiebreaker sweat moment, I believe. So I remember like being like, let's go, and you're like, oh, I have to set breakers. I'm like, ooh, awkward. But like I'm there for you. And also if things go poorly, I wanna like, be there in case like my friend needs it. But like when I'm walking over there, I'm fully expecting just to see like a very exciting moment and like a thing that you care a lot about and it's like very big. And my ideal outcome is that you win, right? But once again, the most likely outcome, I guess in this case is 50-50, right? So it's like, there's an equally chance that you're going to not make it. Maybe you're a little better, maybe you're a little worse, but like, I don't know. To me, it's just like this exciting moment. One of my like favorite Magic memories is, we did some like testing for Atlanta. There was like 11 of us and four of us qualified at RC1, which also just thinking about that is so absurd, right? Like we took almost a 12th of the invites as just our little group. And when Ash won and she won this crazy game against now my friend Connor, who was playing for his first Pro Tour invite against her as well, she like jumps up, jumps on a chair, jumps over part of the table, and runs to get a hug because she was so excited to qualify for her first Pro Tour. That is insane. Like that to me is what it's all about. You know what I mean? It's all about like the emotions and the highs and the lows. And I think one of the things that's like, I talk about how like a lot of the journey is like me wanting to be the best version of myself, but part of that is I need to play against people who really care, right? And I like the idea that like there's someone else who is in the exact same position as me, like you and me in play for the RC invite. It's or the Pro Tour invite at the RC, excuse me. It's a no lose situation, right? Either I make it or my good friend makes it. Like, how could there ever be a loss? And we're gonna play a sick game that we get to talk about for years, and I get to have that same moment with other people. And it's like, oh, maybe I'm gonna lose this, but like, who cares? I'm here to play. All I can do is play the best I can, and I'm gonna get like an awesome experience from this. And it's gonna like motivate me no matter what. Like, it's gonna motivate me to play better if I play sloppy, or it's going to motivate me to like, I'm going to try a bunch of the Pro Tour. Like it's just so sick to even be in that spot because the most likely outcome is I'm not going to be in that spot. Like, the most likely outcome of this weekend is I don't make the Pro Tour. That's just like a statistical thing. I feel good about my deck. I feel good about my deck choice. I feel great about my process. I've done a lot of the good stuff. Now it's about me keeping my head clear and not thinking about things that are outside my control, like like, am I going to get this Pro Tour invite? Is so and so going to have a pass down? Like pass downs are a big part of this. Like you might get 65th, but Sam Pardee got 32nd and has invite for the year. So now you get an invite. Like you can't control that. There's no point thinking about it. All you can do is your best, and you can be giddy and anxious and all those sort of things between the rounds. But when you're playing, you have to push it all aside.
how do you, Mason Clark, do you just sit there and you're like, okay, I'm just not thinking about it now, or like
I just
do
push
you have like
those aren't helpful thoughts. I just push them aside. Like they are there and they'll start to creep up, and I remind myself they don't matter. Like it's not like it's almost like you talk about how balanced I have to be. It's actually kind of the opposite. It's sort of like I have a bad coping mechanism, and what I do is for the 50 minutes or however longer the tournament is, I push it all aside, right? And I just push, and it's like, okay, that's out of my mind. I'm not gonna think about it. I have the rest of my life to remember that I made the wrong land drop. I have the rest of my life to remember I made the bad Thoughtseize choice. That's like I'm gonna think about that stuff. I'm gonna process it. I'm gonna learn from it later. I only have today to like maybe salvage a PT invite. Maybe I can still sneak in on a pass down. Or I only have today to play this match for $100 at the RC. Like how many chances do I have to get to do that? And so I want to try and salvage the opportunity at hand. So it's not like I'm perfectly balanced and like, fully zen and accepting of all outcomes and like, it is what it is or whatever. It's like I'm thinking about that stuff later. I only have the day at the tournament to play the rounds. I only have the time at hand. And worrying about, am I gonna play the PT? Or am I going to, lose here? Like am I going to punt, like did I just punt this game away? Like it can sometimes get to you, but you just have to like try your best to like push it all the way aside.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do something pretty similar, but rather than addressing like, okay, this was wrong and therefore I need to like okay, I know this was wrong and I can think about it later and like having that be a part of my internal monologue. I I don't know. I've definitely spent time where just training myself to be like, okay, well, this is where we're at, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like being able to turn on my goldfish brain and just look at the 6 seconds in front of me and say, okay, this is the board state, this is what's in my hand, this is what I know, this is what life totals are, to kind of recenter myself. And I think that's part of like just a process for managing, like in general, I mean, managing the process behind how I play and the things I'm thinking about while I am playing, and like kind of knowing how to pick up the thread when you've dropped the ball. Like for me, and especially thinking back to like my earliest days of playing competitive Magic, and back to the version of myself who would just lose every win and in match for top eight because they felt like they played a lot worse or made bad decisions, is just like, I mean, kind of to what you're speaking on, really internalizing and accepting that like these these situations are rare, right? There's only so many tournaments you'll play in your life. There's only so many, matches for day two you'll play. There's only so many matches for top eight you'll play, but they're not unique. You will be in this situation again, and so like you don't need to put the weight of the world on it. That was really helpful to me. I mean, finding ways to recenter myself if I found that I was getting distracted or my mind was wandering. So like, and this actually came from something that my friend Jonathan Skennick said to another friend of mine at one point about like managing a really gummed up board state. And he said, what I will do if I like, or like what I would suggest to do is if you really have lost the plot in a board state, is just think about what happens if you attack with every creature and then start working backwards from there. So like if you just like right click attack with all, and you're at least that way, at least you're productively doing something, right? You're engaging with something in the game. So even if you've lost your train of thought, lost where you were, and need to like rebuild it, just starting with, okay, what if I made this play? Why is that outcome good or bad? And just, making sure that you're still moving your feet forward. I tend to use a lot of sports analogies in the sense when I talk about it with people in coaching, but like the anime is kind of the adaptation of this. This is like it's like what inspired anime.
Oh,
It's like the source material.
It's like the manga.
It's like the source material. It's like the manga for the manga.
Gotcha. So it's like the trauma.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's pretty
Let's keep
dramatic.
going.
Yeah, exactly. So like now we're here. What do? We say the next thing we're going to say, which is yeah, just finding a way to continue to move the game forward and continuing to engage, because the second that you're like really standing there flat-footed, that's the second that you're losing time, you're losing your focus, and you're losing the edge that you had. And every moment that passes like that, and every turn that passes like that, that's where you'll look back and be like, wow, I wish I would have made a bunch of different decisions because my brain was so occupied with all of these things that were completely irrelevant to what I wanted, which was the outcome of the match. I didn't want to think about how cool it would be to get my photo taken when I top aided. I didn't want to think about how I'm going to spend that $100 I'm going to win. I don't want to be thinking about how cool it's going to be to go to the Pro Tour. I want to be thinking about the things that lead to me getting to experience those. And so just finding ways either through, resetting your perspective, re like kind of like jump starting your engine when it peters out or stalls out if you are someone who experiences those nerves and has issues with playing under that kind of pressure, and just making sure to at least this is like my number one thing I would say is just if you've ever played Magic Online or Magic Arena, that means that you have played Magic where all you see are cards. You don't need to focus on anything other than cards when you play Magic. If you really want to, you can tilt your head down 45 degrees, you can stare right at the table, and you can look at everything your opponent plays. And you don't have to ever make eye contact with them. You don't ever have to exchange words with them outside of what's happening in the game. You can completely lock in and lock everything out and play inside your own head. A lot of people play Magic that way, especially competitively. There's no rule that says you have to be really, social and bubbly and fun the whole time. You have to be there for that. No, you can just look at the game and think about what matters in the game. And if you can get yourself to remember how to do that, even when your brain wants to think about other things, or find ways to kind of like recenter yourself. I use mantras sometimes when it comes to like certain decks I'm playing. If it's like, how do I make sure I don't make the wrong mulligan decision? Is like, well, I know in my head I have these parameters, and I'll tell myself, yep, not keep a hand that doesn't do this, not keep a hand that doesn't do that, right? Like, my deck is good because of this, and repeating that. Like, for example, the mono green deck, I would often tell myself, like, if I've got to do something on turn 1, or I've got to be doing something by turn 4, like my hand has to have a plan. Especially knowing my opponent's deck list, being like, okay, I spent 2 minutes reviewing and focusing in on what was going to matter in the way that this match played out. Now what's my plan for enacting it? And I think that the more that you just let yourself engage with the playing of Magic as an activity and like playing the game, at least for me, that's how I learned to unfeel the pressure. And the more that I spent time between rounds, avoiding things that would make me be reminded of the pressure, be it, just like not wanting to talk about my record, or not focusing on that, or not talking about the event at length, like finding games to play between rounds, or, listening to music, just reducing the number of decisions or thoughts in my head I have to make. That's part of why I make playlists for every tournament. So I just know what I'm listening to. I don't have to think about it anymore. And even in the lead up to the tournament, I get to spend like the morning of, rather than getting nervous, kind of deciding, okay, I'm tuning my playlist. Do I put this song on or this song on? And it just gives you ways to keep your brain engaged and focused on something without focusing on things that build pressure, and instead on ways that kind of alleviate it, that keep it from seeping in. So that's just kind of my experience. I don't know if you have anything that you remember doing to really get yourself to that point of, I'm just going to take all the bad thoughts and the bad feelings, or like all the stress and all the anxiety that can come with pressure, and put it over there in that other corner and look at it later. Like, I don't know if that comes from something or how you necessarily do that outside of just telling yourself that doesn't matter, stop thinking about it. But yeah, I mean, it really is something that for a really long time, because of my own issues with it, and struggles with it, I took a lot of time to really look at different solutions, and just kept on trying things until I found things that work.
Yeah, I think a big part of it for me comes from like my anxiety, which can be like pretty all encompassing at times, and for a long time kind of ruled my life. Where, like, I've probably said more words on this podcast tonight than I did in all of school up until 10th grade, outside of having to be called on or whatever. And that's a big part of that was anxiety, and it getting the best of me, and it like making me worry about like how things were going to go and stuff like that. And then just I got on some anti-anxiety medicine a little bit, and had some like kind of big moments, and that was kind of the big takeaway, was like, it is better to have these things happen and to have these experiences and these highs and these lows than it is to live a life avoiding these sort of things or in fear of them. And being like constantly worried about what's going to happen or what's going to go on isn't going to help you. It's just going to ruin your life. And like, getting tense or stressed out about like, oh, this isn't going as planned. Oh, I don't know what's going on, is not helpful. It doesn't get you anywhere. and like very similar with like the Magic. It's like I don't know if I'm gonna make this, maybe I'm gonna miss whatever. It just doesn't matter. So it's like kind of a real life learned thing on just like how I live. Like I actually like high pressure, high stress situations. I thrive in at work as well. Whether that's like coaching or like the day job or like, working on like MH3, for example. Like there are moments that felt high pressure, high stress that I feel like I did a lot of my best work in when we had to solve something. And there was a lot of like, pressure on it. Like we don't want to like I don't want to ruin my favorite format of my favorite game, you know? Like I want to make sure like I'm doing the best I can and there's only
Well,
so
then how come you designed Nadu yourself by hand?
well because I hate you. And I hate
Oh,
you more than I love Magic.
oh,
And
okay.
yeah, that just makes sense. Don't
That
ask
does just make
don't ask. This
sense.
is why I made Nadu Abe. Anyways.
Well, I want you to know that you missed. You missed. I didn't play any of it. I didn't touch it. It looked too bad.
Yeah. Maybe you did. Yeah. Maybe I should have advocated for that card being cooler, the OG version. You know,
Hmm.
maybe there is some part of my bad where it's kind of like, doesn't really matter. Card has no home. Maybe I could have given better feedback about the card that was Nadu before it became Nadu, you know. But like, I can't let like what ifs and anxieties run my life. Same thing with like, working in game design or whatever, or like balancing those cards. It's like you need to be aware that like what if this is strong, right? Like how we'll interact, but you can't like derail on just like one train of thought. You have to push forward, do what makes the most sense. And I think that's true for like, most things in life. Like there have been a lot of moments where it's like high stress and like I shine at like, okay, well, how are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to move forward? Like other people need a lot of time when they're high stressed, and I like kick into gear of like, well, we have to solve it. Like waiting isn't going to help. Like
Yeah.
there's this problem with like your health or whatever. It's like, great, let's solve this problem. Like what are we going to do to take actionable steps to solve this? You're like my mom when she moved houses, it got a bunch of things stolen from her from these movers or whatever, and I like, immediately kind of took over in that situation and put her on the path of like correcting it, right? Because
Hmm.
she broke down, I mean, understandably so, like like to taken advantage of, blah blah. I had this emotional breakdown, but for me, it was like, okay, how do we solve this? You know, and like immediately I asked like Trey's a lawyer, so I reach out to Trey on like what's the best course of action. What do we need to do there? Okay, let's call this boss. This boss will surely not want this sort of bad thing to happen. Like da 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 da. Let's handle it. Let's take care of it. And it ended up, she had to eventually go to like small claims court or whatever and won her
Hmm.
case. But like she was like ready to resign and give up, and I am someone that's like, well, we have to solve that. We cannot give up, right? And it's the same in Magic, where it's like I make a misplay, that sucks, whatever. Like this past weekend, Abe, I made the dumbest misplay you've probably ever seen, where my opponent has a card in the Great Creator. They tick it up on a Mox Amber, and then I, make a construct or whatever, and they have a something in the way like a sowing microspawn that can block. And I have an Emery, a Haywire Mite, and the construct. And I'm like, well, the Karn's at one loyalty, and so I'll hold my Emery back because that plays around Dismember, and I sorry, it doesn't play it played around some other card, Kozilek's Command or whatever, and then I can like beat everything or whatever. And you might be thinking, what's wrong with this? Well, how did my opponent tick up their Karn and have it at one loyalty? It can never be at zero loyalty. I just flubbed the one. And that stung and hurt a lot. And I lost a game that was basically unlosable. If I just swing the Emery 2, my opponent's dead. Right? I win the game. And instead, I lost the game. And like thinking back on it too, like my line doesn't even really play around what I wanted to as well as I'd like beyond the power where Karn's alive. You know what I mean? And that really sucked. It really hurt. And I was like, God, I cannot believe I made this mistake, whatever. Like once the match is over, then the next match starts and it's whatever. I gotta win. You know? Played against a Tron, like through the breach deck on the draw. Gotta do the best I can. Doesn't matter. I made that mistake last round. That's behind me. Does it stick with me? Yes. Am I going to remember that mistake for a long time? Yes. Is it going to be a learning moment? Yes. But it doesn't matter. I have to keep going, and I ended up top fouring that event and conceding to a friend who got his invite. And that is kind of just how it goes. I think a lot of people might have, honestly, maybe the dumbest mistake I've made in all of Magic, you know? And the stakes were low or whatever, right? It's just an RCQ locally. But like, it is something that like I can control and learn from and slow down. And that's like a great learning moment. And I'm glad that happened then. And I'm glad I had that moment because now I feel even better going into the RC. If I had just won or whatever, like my opponent just concedes because they can see I can attack them and they know I have the breach in hand, they know I have the station in play, then like, maybe I don't learn that. Maybe I play bad at the RC. It's like an exciting and good moment. It's not a bad thing. It's a chance to learn and grow.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot to. Anytime we talk about these subjects, they're really kind of about being a player in those situations and how we handle on the mental. It's hard to not get into talking a lot about a lot of things in a bigger picture and how we really see them. Hopefully for players out there who, if you're a listener who finds yourself in a high pressure situation, you are built like Mason and you're able to just thrive in that. If you're a listener who is not built like Mason, hopefully some of the things I said help too. But overall, I think that kind of, procedural process of, okay, it doesn't matter what I'm feeling in this moment about what could happen or what did happen or, what's going to happen. All of those thoughts are not productive to me achieving the result I need or that I want. So let me focus on what is, and then finding ways to kind of places to pick up your focus on what is important and what does matter in front of you. I think that's just like, for just about anything, a good way to handle it, high pressure or low pressure. So yeah, I mean, hopefully this has been helpful. So I don't know if you have anything else to add, Mason, before we get on to always improving.
No, I don't think so. Let's get on to always improving. It is the main point of the show. Abe, what's your always improving moment this week?
My always improving moment this week came from just actually getting my playgroup together to do some paper testing over the weekend ahead of the RC. We were able to get a good group of, like, the whole day was basically between 4 and 6 people actually just playing the relevant matches that needed to be played, identifying the solutions to problems that were being had in the decks that we were considering, just getting not only myself to be putting in the work, but kind of bring that process and getting it to come to fruition with all of the people I've been working with and getting all hands on deck in a way that I have not necessarily succeeded in doing before. And also just kind of really getting everyone to agree on the same page of, okay, we are doing this because we need to be playing matches to learn. And like, these are the things we're trying to learn by playing, and kind of passing that process through and getting that support was really good. It's something that I have not been able to do in a long time, and I can't even remember the last time I got together. Like, actually, I was taking apart the last gauntlet I had built. I have a 1K box that I keep like extra sleeves, a Sharpie, and like extra bulk commons and uncommons in for the purpose of playtest carding decks together. And the last decks in there was from modern. I think it was modern RPTQ season, because I had like Bloodbraid Elf. Yeah, I had Bloodbraid Jund together. I had Traverse Shadow. I had Eldrazi Tron, but like with a Matter Reshaper and Mind Stone. I had some of the finest decks of all time put together there. And to think about like how much more productive that felt now compared to doing it back then was just a big eye-opening, like, oh wow, I've gotten like better at this and understand more of what I'm trying to do, and I'm doing this more efficiently. And also making sure that's something that I can impart on the team that I'm working with, like the individuals who I'm working with, to help them for their RC2, and bring that process and spreading it so it can hopefully be how we do more things going forward. So that was me this week. How about you, Mason?
Yeah, my always improving moment comes from just actually playing that RCQ. So I talked about it a second ago there with like the dumb mistake, which like I think there's probably a great always improving moment somewhere in there about slowing down, and just like examining for what it is when you know you have the game locked up. Don't walk in for like silly mistakes or whatever. And I think that could have been one. But my actual always improving moment kind of comes from like I just sort of knew myself and I knew that I would actually have less fun staying home than playing the RCQ, which was also like 3 minutes from my house, right? And that would not be as a good a time for me. It would not be as relaxing. And I think for a lot of people, they would be like, oh, well, I'm doing so much magic. I'm about to do more magic, right? Like I talked about, now, Abe, 30 hours from now, I'm going to be in the car driving 8 hours to go play magic all weekend, right? And my job is like helping people with magic, and I have to prepare for magic, and I put in a bunch of time. But I knew for myself it'd be more relaxing, and I felt better about, playing it and knowing myself in that way than if I had just like sat around the house. I think I would have felt bad because like Sunday I could have played another RCQ, but it was about 45 minutes away, so I decided to skip and do some other things with my day. And I felt kind of bad because part of what I did was just not do anything for a little while, and that's just not who I am. I like doing stuff and I like the competing. And so while I got some other things done that were important, and I think I got some great testing in during that time that made me feel a little less bad at the end of it all, it's just a moment of knowing myself and knowing what works for me that I really liked. So,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I get the same kind of feeling sometimes. Like, why are you playing Magic? Aren't you so tired of it? It's like I don't know. Like, I enjoy Magic. It's why I play it. It's good to get. And now, not every format all the time. Like
mm-hmm.
sometimes, if I'm not enjoying a format, I'm not going to
Oh,
play it. But sometimes I'm just like, yeah, let me jam. Let me show up to that local. Let me fire up a league.
mm-hmm.
Let me get in the streets.
For sure. No,
Uh,
that's good. Also, sometimes you got to win a little credit. You're buying a bunch of triomes for your stupid mana base, and they're all $20. And past you bought every triome but Zagoth during COVID for $3 with an old sponsor of the show. And then now you're looking at $22 Zagoth triomes in the case, and you're like, I could just play a different deck. I could save
I can
$80.
just do it.
Yeah,
I can just do it.
I have
I no one
sleeved up.
no one says I have to play Zagoth Triumph.
Yeah.
No one.
Yeah, what if I remove the deck away from these colors? It's 5 colors. I just need
Yeah.
to go a different direction. Uh,
Sultai don't need them.
yeah, Sacred Foundry, that Leyline Binding. I actually think it's a little bad for my mana base. No one's gonna do the math.
Yeah.
They're not gonna prove it to me.
No.
Yeah,
No one
so
can.
they can't. That's true. So that's gonna do it for always. We want to give a quick shout out to our patrons before we do our Patreon question. So the newest patrons this week are Sir Epic, Michael, Matthew, Stephen, Connor, Isaiah, and Cam. Thank you all so much for your support on Patreon. The show will always be free, but if you have liked the show and you want to give back a little extra, consider checking out patreon.com/tcmtg and see if there's anything that might draw your eye. One of the biggest perks beyond getting live episodes is going and joining the patron only Discord, where there's a lot of conversation going on all the time. And sometimes things that would like maybe be a Patreon question go on there. But we do have a part of the show every week where the patrons get to ask a question, and the only way to do that is through patreon.com/tcmtg. This week's patron on question comes from Adrian and says, can you talk about how you developed your intuition in magic? Intuition is one of my weaknesses personally. I think about every decision and notice my mental bandwidth being taken up and hurts future decisions in those games. So any tips and thinking how y'all developed it would be super helpful. Abe, you want to go first?
Sure. I think that intuition is one of those things in Magic that gets grossly misrepresented. And I want to talk about that a bit before I get into kind of how I think about like intuition or making plays on quote unquote feel or intuition. And that is that intuition is really just like heuristic analysis. It's like looking at things and kind of knowing what's generally good. And so to develop that, I mean, a lot of my intuition came from, playing a lot of matches of Magic over a long period of time. Or really most likely probably just playing a lot of matches over a short period of time in excess, the point where I kind of ingrained in myself things that could allow me to mentally shortcut effectively the things that I was facing. So like, knowing if an attack is good or bad is kind of a somewhere beneath my conscious brain. I know the answer to, is this a good or bad thing, right? Like if I'm attacking my 2/2 into their 3/2 and they block, I know that's a good thing because my 2/2 is weaker than their 3/2. And so if they block, I'm turning that creature off. That's most likely a good thing to do. Same thing if they attack their 3/2 into my 2/2. Odds are it's good for me to block in a majority of cases, and that's my intuition speaking.
Yeah.
But if
Sorry.
you notice, when I say that, it's right, I'm saying that's most of the time, making a broad generalization, and it doesn't establish the context. And it's because I've thought about logically what are the rules and what are the scoring mechanisms at play there that say, okay, this is a good thing to do. And I think that if you don't spend time building up those general, like simple shortcuts that allow you to make, just make decisions on somewhat of a quote unquote intuition of looking at something and saying, okay, this is probably heading in the right direction, or this is likely where the game needs to head, then or this is the right, this is why this kind of decision is a good one to make. I think that Who's the Beatdown is a good example of like kind of people who really grasp that wind up with better intuition, because as soon as they ask themselves that question of who's the beatdown, they're able to say, okay, well, and that means that I should be doing this, and therefore, the obvious like the obvious thing is this. If you're not spending time to really think about what are the big picture pieces and what are the rules applying here that are kind of dictating patterns of sets of decisions you're making, and that's not something you've ever taken time to reflect on when you play games, is what kind of caused the end result, and then internalizing that. A good example is like, if you have a really, really gummed up board where neither player can attack on the ground, but a player is a flying creature, like it's very intuitive that flying creature is probably the thing that matters most, right? That creature that has flying is now the only thing that gets to attack or block. Well, attack really. Everything else can block, but blocking is not valuable because no one can attack. But this creature can get in damage. So now I'm just shortcutting the game to saying, okay, intuitively, my flying creatures are ones I want to hold on to if the game is going to go long, or are the ones I need to save my removal spells for example, right? Those are kind of intuition-based plays that I can verbalize all the thoughts behind them when I really stop to look at them and examine them, but most of the time, it's something I don't have to think about, which is also why intuition's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of players who play the exact same way and have played the exact same way for a long time and have made a lot of the exact same decisions for a long time, and they fall behind when things change around them, right? When the rules of engagement change for a format, or even within Magic. I know a lot of people who struggled with the London Mulligan, and people still do, with knowing that like mulliganing is much more acceptable now than it was when mulliganing to 5 meant that you just started the game with your opponent mind rotting you. You just had to deal with what you had. These things all just kind of add up, and so it's really not about anyone having good intuition being just a strength. I think it's really about making sure that you're prioritizing thinking about the games you play in a broader sense, and coming away with that with a takeaway for yourself of, this is what mattered and this is what matters, so that when the next time you see a situation remotely like it, you can say, well, in other games where the games got gummed up, this thing mattered, so I should care about that. And then that kind of that guides your intuition. I don't know how you feel about any of that, Mason, or if you have a different, journey or story around kind of intuition or how you interpret it, but I'd love to hear any of
No,
that.
I think that's good. I think so. An example of a thing that happened when like working on cards was like we were given a problem, and I thought for like 5 seconds about the problem, and then came up with a solution. And I like solved it. And someone said, "How did you do that so quickly?" And I said, "Oh, it's easy. I thought for 5 seconds and spent the first 30 years of my life thinking about that stuff." You know? And it's like kind of a joke, right? But like I kind of feel like that's what intuition is. It's like I put in a bunch of work. Like Adrian talks about how, thinks about every situation or whatever. But and it's good to think about the situation in hand of its own, but you need to lean on those past experiences to know like where this differs and where things kind of change up, right? And so for me, it's like, oh, I have played a bunch of these types of games in the past, like you mentioned. I know this is kind of how things go, and I'm able to kind of see that this is like from everything else that's happened in this game, it's good to keep going this way, or vice versa, right? Maybe I know normally I'm supposed to, plot my slip shot, let's say, right? But because of other things that happen, I know I should actually hard cast it here. And I end up making a game winning play. And someone's like, how did you know to do that or whatever? It's like, well, I put in a bunch of time. I learned these things and I saw what was different about them and like what made this, the exception that kind of proves the rule, right? Where it's like, normally it's terrible, but they did this and this on an earlier turn and the game was about this. So I did this, right? It's me playing Magic for all this time and constantly learning and thinking about and internalizing and having like an unhealthy relationship with the game for 7 or 8 years. Like if you're listening to a Magic the Gathering strategy podcast at this point in the show, you probably have a lot of things like this internally, and you just have to act on those things.
Yeah, I think that's something that just listening to you talk about it really helped me. That's a good way to verbalize it is like when you there's nothing wrong with thinking through the answer all the way, right? And honestly, like
Mm-hmm.
the best Magic players are able to do that, right? They identify the places where they can deviate because they're thinking about the consequences of their decision. But there's a difference between in terms of how much computing power of your brain and how much time it takes you and all of that with going from like you say with slick shot. Let's say it's like okay, plotting slick shot or casting slick shot of okay, well, they could have removal spell here. I want to try to play the slick shot with protection, so I'm just going to plot it. Right,
Mm-hmm.
plotting it saves us from that, and then thinking, okay, well, but if I cast it, I get to deal 1 point of damage because they're maybe they don't have a removal spell, maybe I get the damage in, maybe that's worth it. And then you kind of think of, okay, these are my two options. But if you start from, okay, in this matchup, I know that plotting Slickshot is better. Now you get to start yourself by only asking yourself half the questions. Instead of being, okay, what's the upside of plotting Slickshot? What's the upside of casting Slickshot? You're just asking yourself, I know that plotting Slickshot is the default. What happens if I don't do the default? And by doing that, you cut out such a large chunk of the things you could be thinking about that it saves your mental energy for decisions down the line, allows you to track more information in the present. It lifts the mental tax on your brain. And so I think that if you think about more things like that in terms of what is intuition, other than the trimming the fat of the processes that you're going through and the questions you're asking yourself about the decisions you're making, by cleaning up the kind of the surrounding situation and giving yourself a head start on the problem, that's what you should focus on. If you want to build intuition, it's about building that head start. And yeah, like you said, playing Magic for in like incredibly diligently for several years is I know how both of us really developed the intuitions that we have. Like I've been playing Magic for more than half of my time on this earth, and I'm not even 30. So like like that's a lot of time to have played a lot of Magic. And there are some times where I don't play Magic for a stretch of like 2 to 3 months. And I'll come back and sure I'll be not as sharp because I won't have done it in a while, but because I know how to do that and I have so many of the foundational fundamental like heuristics down and can intuit those or understand how to learn the new things I need to learn, it is able to keep me in doing it. I think learning that process of getting better at or shortening the work you have to do inside your head to learn things, that's really the key. If you can unlock that, you can go really far.
Thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode of Constructed Criticism. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter at CCMTG. And you can find us wherever you get podcasts as well. Abe, if someone wants to find you, where can they go?
You can find me over at twitter.com/more nothings. And you can find me at the RC this weekend. I know we talked about it on the top of the show, but definitely do, if you see me and your listeners, say hello. Let me know how things are going. I'll have some wristbands on me. I'm definitely really excited to be there. Honestly, like, my tournament in Dallas didn't go great, but getting the chance to, like, it was 5 or 6 of y'all who came up and took time to talk to me, and that was really just like the biggest highlight of my whole tournament. So if I get to experience that again, it'll be a success, even if the most likely outcome of me not qualifying for the Pro Tour happens. I'll still have a wonderful time. How about you, Mason?
You can find me on Twitter at Mason E. Clark. You can reach out for coaching there or via my email, masoneclark@gmail.com. You can find me at twitch.tv/the Mason Clark. And if you're wanting a little bit more Mason in your week, I guested on the Jerry T podcast with Dave Shields this week because Dave was out and couldn't do it. So Jerry and I talk about Pioneer a good bit there. We talk a lot about his deck, which is the Boros Leyline deck, is what he was wanting to play at the time of the recording. So if you're interested in that, maybe you can check that out. And you can hear me talk more about that format as well. We recorded that on Sunday, so fairly up to date as you're going to get for podcasts, as it takes a little time to edit and do them well. Thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode of Constructive Criticism, and we'll see you all next week for another episode of CCMTG.